I don't know the women's names who I'm always passing by on my street.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. It is I, Mighty Sophia, here to break down for you guys yet another episode of Better Call Saul. So we are already on episode 3. And spoiler alert before we dive into the mad thick of things, as I will be bearing all in this review, I would like to thank all of you guys too. One more time, thank you for helping me to break 8,000 subscribers and 800,000 channel views. This is chaos, you guys. I don't know how y'all deal with me, but it is a pleasure to be your digital TV friend. So without further ado, let's really do this thing for real. This was yet another episode, yet another step in the direction of me falling head over heels in love with this series, and I really hope that you guys are enjoying it as much as I am. Of course, leave all your thoughts in the comments as we go through this, but what I loved most about this week's episode was really getting to see so much further into the character of Jimmy McGill, because so we start off with a flashback, and of course the glorious wigs of old. You know, I love to see how makeup artists and shows attempt to to deal with those changes, but I think that Bob Odenkirk does a pretty damn fine version of his younger self, you know. But so we get to see pre, you know, maybe this is more like Slippin Jimmy era Jimmy. We see that he is behind bars and he is ready to work the system and rock the system because, hey, he's got his rock star lawyer brother Chuck on the case, who is none too pleased to see him since this is the first time that they've made any contact in 5 years. And here's Jimmy talking, what's her strategy? What's her game plan? What can you pull out of the hat? Where's the white rabbit? You know, it's all that business, and yet where is the family element? Where is the, you know, where is any connection, any foundation for this kind of relationship? And that scene, it also shows us too kind of the respect that Jimmy has for his brother, and maybe that's kind of starting to fray around the edges a little bit. You know, we think back to the previous episode where Jimmy is insisting that Chuck takes off the space blanket, and he just keeps pushing and pushing and pushing. So we see that their relationship kind of has this, it's had this ebb and flow, and once upon a time, Chuck was the knight in white armor. We see that Jimmy is now himself in the position that Chuck used to be in. But it's really crazy to see how the focus of Better Call Saul differs a lot from Breaking Bad, in that it's not just a tale of hubris and watching this man rise and collapse at the last minute. The thing about Jimmy is that arguably in ways he's even more complex, but I see that both with him and Walter, especially with Walter towards the beginning of his Heisenberg career. There's this constant flip-flopping back and forth between what is the right thing to do and how do I survive, you know. And we see quite a few times Jimmy's survivalist instincts kicking in, and just his utter desperation it's something that Bob conveys so well through the character of Mr. McGill, our stickler for justice. And what's cool about him, honestly, is I feel like he's a really good lawyer, because ultimately what he does with each and every one of his clients, no matter how unsavory, is he ensures that their story is told, and vibrantly so. You know, because he's kind of stuck in the monotony of the system. All the other public defenders have their classic approach, but when it comes to Jimmy, I mean, it is all theatrics, and he is ready to go ham when Nacho comes a-calling. You know, he really pulls out all the stops and is attempting to set everything right, because basically what we see happen in this episode, so we think that maybe, just maybe at the beginning, Jimmy is he's finally decided that he's in the game. You know, we see that he's looking at his little case of matches, he's looking at the phone number, but he ends up calling one of his other lawyer friends, Kim, not for phone sex, but for the PG and quite possibly maybe PG-13 conversation, during which time he tries to awkwardly suggest the fact that maybe the Kettlemans are in danger, you know, like just casual conversation slash I'm drunk, which is a thing that we know to be true of Jimmy quite a few times. He's got his little pocket vodka wherever he goes, but so he attempts to set the stage for what's already in motion on Nacho's end, not exactly knowing what kind of role he's going to have in this, or maybe he has decided it in his head. You know, it's not something that we really get to see play out on screen. But then he goes and does the whole robot sex voice in the payphone in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the night, with the empty paper towel roll and just all the madness. But he says right before then, he's like, you know, I'm not a hero. So he's not a hero, he's not a criminal. He's a lawyer? Just a lawyer, though? I don't know, man. I don't know. There's just so much more to you. But, yeah. So it was really fun to see just the franticness with what, you know, you think about the song, the payphone song, Maroon 5, like, I'm at a payphone trying to call home. That is Jimmy McGill. Dude, can you really see Adam Levine like chucking his quarters into the machine? No, that is freaking Jimmy McGill. He's at a payphone trying to call freaking everybody on every side of this scheme that he has accidentally kind of totally found himself in the middle of. But it's just like all these, it's like this set of dominoes, but some of them just keep falling such that they're still kind of standing up, like they're not totally knocked down, but some it's just such a crazy system, and it's so fun to follow, and the writing is very tight, and I enjoy the pacing of it all because it keeps the tension very much alive. I do not believe for a minute that the fact that we know kind of where the story leads, that we know what the general ceiling is going to be, how does that in any way take away from what we're seeing on the screen right now? You know, like, how does knowing, like, who's alive at the beginning of Breaking Bad give us any less of a sense of peril when Jimmy's life is on the line? Like, it's just not that way for me. And that to me is an indication of seriously top-notch writing and directing, and just the entire way that the show is conducted. It's done in such a way that you are wrapped up in this process, in the complexities of this character and in his journey to becoming Saul Goodman. It's a bit different of a journey to becoming Heisenberg, you know, because really there's not any particular end goal for Jimmy, as opposed to Walter, who at the beginning thinks like, okay, my life is ending, I'm kind of on my way out the back door, I'm gonna do this to secure my legacy family, you know, like he has this whole trajectory. The way that he achieves it, of course, goes awry. I mean, best laid plans of mice and men situation, but with Jimmy, he's just constantly shifting and moving, and we see that there is something that he wants to be. He's a guy who is so capable and even desirous of being good. But at the end of the day, he's a little bit better at being bad. Breaking Bad. Just went there. But anyways, so it's fascinating to get to see how kind of the entire situation that unfolds is basically his fault, because he ends up kind of even against his own will intervening on the behalf of the Kettlemans, who in turn end up kidnapping themselves. And I predicted it. I knew before they even went back to the house with the detectives and Kim and Jimmy, I knew that that was the way that it was going. I thought, like, oh yeah, like as soon as they set foot in the house and just seeing everything knocked over, like I could just totally picture the scene unfolding in my head. And like, I'm curious as to how, like, do they send the kids out first? Be like, oh, go, you know, take the stuff out. We're just gonna, like, I don't know how exactly that part of the equation played out as far as, like, knocking over all the furniture, but hey, they made it happen. And so then, of course, sorry, I am, like, I have just enough, like, saliva to be able to talk and not totally die, but I don't know if it's actually enough for me to not die, maybe. But anyway, so now we're in the interesting and very upsetting little predicament that Nacho is on his way to being compromised, because even though he was not involved in the disappearance, like, I mean, he was casing the joint, like he told Jimmy, and Jimmy was running his mouth long before he got the truth out of Nacho, which Nacho was prepared to offer up to, you know, kind of set the stage for what was going to happen and how things were going to go down. But what's interesting is basically, we're going to see next week that Nacho's going to feel that he was cheated because Jimmy intervened, and because of the whole, I mean, it's such a fascinating scenario. And we see how Jimmy has kind of caught himself in this incredibly dangerous and volatile situation, because Nacho was the one member of Tuco's crew who is actually kind of like, hey, I'm down with you. I see what you're about. Let's go in on a deal together, you know. He vied for him. He saved Jimmy's life. I mean, I wonder, you know, if Jimmy's blood is going to come into play at some point in the future, because that's still in the van. And he's like, yeah, test the blood. It's the, you know, not Kettleman blood. Can't say whose it actually is, but it is defined by what it is not. Yeah, so it's that whole kind of the moral compromise and the struggle with having a conscience and being a lawyer and coming into contact with very, very dangerous and hostile individuals with their promises and ultimatums, and Jimmy's just kind of in the middle of this hurricane at this point, and it will be very fascinating to see how it all unfolds and how he digs himself out of yet another hole. Also really cool was the way that Mike was used in this episode. We finally got to see the takedown scene, and I didn't actually realize, even though I had seen the scene before, where Jimmy and Mike somehow ended up on the ground, and I was like, okay, I could see how, with all this buildup of the sticker mishaps, this finally transpired, but Jimmy laid a hand on him first. I don't think he really saw the bowl that he was messing with there, but so the detectives try and take advantage of the situation with Mike's threat of pressing charges or whatever, and they're like, well, he's gonna drop the charges if you help us, you know, prove that this guy is actually guilty. But then, in this perfect moment of clarity, in this moment where Mike realizes that he's really being condescended to by these detectives, he's like, actually, screw the whole thing, calling it off, stickers and justice, doing the right thing, doing the wrong thing, I don't give a crap, you know. He saw that Jimmy's story made sense, that Nacho is Nacho guy. Oh man, oh, we are going to have such a lovely season of terrible puns and like mismatched movie references, like the Here's Johnny scene at the very end, which is just could not be more perfect. I had a feeling that those words were somehow going to be uttered. You know, here's Jimmy. But, yeah, so they got Jimmy and Mike got to have a nice little heart-to-heart on the stairwell, and what Mike shared with him actually led to the acquisition of the, quote, dumbass clients in the woods. And, you know, he revealed that people don't like to go far from home. Everybody expects you to run far, far away. But no, you stand your ground. You stick it out. And that reminds me a hell of a lot of Breaking Bad, because that's sort of what Walter attempts to do, is establish himself, keep up the guise of normalcy, because, I mean, really, where else do you go? And so he is so, there's a lot of factors that went into the way that he was in that show. But at the same time, you know, He didn't want to be far from home. He wanted to have his household in line and to have his regime simultaneously, which is kind of like sort of in a way a little bit what's going on with the Kettlemans. It's like they want to be just close enough. They've got everything on them, you know, they've made off with the goods, and they are just close enough to the life that they have established, the life that they have lived in the public, to still feel like, okay, we've got this. It's that sense of normalcy. They're tethered to this existence that, well, they've now just kind of exploded. But we see in that very short little preview at the very end of the episode, for next week's episode, we see that he is offered that very same dough that Nacho was saying he would split with Jimmy. And now, 2 roads diverge in a yellow wood. In which one will Jimmy travel down? Regardless, I think he's pretty much screwed in the eyes of Tuco and Nacho and company. So that's going to be just a barrel of happy monkeys, you know? It'll be good times. But yeah, let me know what you guys thought about this episode. I have so many other thoughts, just so many cool and intricate things that we get to see. But ultimately, the really big takeaway for me is getting to see how Jimmy's attempts at making the right choices, I think, are kind of leading him to a place where he can shut down that part of his mind, maybe with more relative ease, in order to get to the point where he becomes Saul. And yeah, he definitely struggles with even the persona of Saul Goodman down the line, but it's fascinating to see, you know, I'm not a hero. I'm not a hero. I'm not a criminal. Just a lawyer. But we'll see how all of those things kind of converge and get mixed and weird and crazy, and it's going to be lots of fun. So thank you guys so much for watching. Like I said, take it all down into the comments. Anything I missed, I'd be more than happy to chat with you there. I'm officially out of water in my throat, and I am holding back one enormous coughing fit that will take me to my grave. So I love you guys if I never see you again. And I will be back before you know it. Take care.